Hi, today it's Fiber Friday, so we're going to start with some cable work today, and I picked a very easy pattern. It's called the Antler Toque. So in order to find the pattern, I'm going to send you, it's a free pattern, go to Tin Can Knits, and when you get there at the top, there are pictures, but then if you scroll down a little bit, you can go to the patterns. If you go to the hats pattern, you can find the Antler Toque. And toque is a Canadian word for hat, I guess, cap. So find this pattern. I only printed out 2 pages. I printed out page 3, and then I copied the information about the sizing, the yarn, the materials, those kind of things. And so I'm going to show you kind of what I do when I'm making a pattern. The other thing you're going to need is I have some Brava Sport Weight. It's a really nice, it's an acrylic, so it's nice for kids. I have my Knit Picks Majestic Wood Interchangeable 4-square, and these are the cube, the ones that don't roll as much. So I'm going to be using those today. And you're going to need a size 6 and a size 8. So I pulled out my size 6. I have my cable, I have my tightener, and I have my cable. This you can find at Amazon. It's a cable needle, and it's a little bit thinner in the inside than it is on the 2 ends. So you have your points, but then it gets thinner on the inside. So you're going to need all of this, and you might want your ruler also. So to get started, let's start with the pattern first. If you've downloaded it or if you're waiting to download it. So I want to make a child. So I'm going to highlight my child, and it fits 16-inch head. So I'm going to need, I'm coloring, and you can use a marker, you can use colored pencil. I need 125 yards, and this is 273 yards, so we're good. And then our gauge is 18 stitches. Usually I'm pretty good. I don't do a lot of swatching. I know a lot of people say we're supposed to, but I don't do a lot of swatching. So I will go through, and mine are all the first numbers before we get to the parentheses. And so if you go through and do this to your pattern before you get started, it makes it a lot easier when you're getting ready to do your patterning. Now, if you look, for example, if using written instructions proceed as follows. Round 1, you're going to knit 4, cable 4 in the back, cable 4 in the front, knit 4, purl 3, and in parentheses it says 5, 3, 5. I'm going to do it 5 times because I'm doing the child's. So you're going to go through, and I'm highlighting not only the pattern but also the 5 that I want to do. So, and this one I want to do 6 times. Oops, I did that one wrong. So I don't want that one. I'm going to cross that one off so I don't get confused. And if you're making this for more than one person, you can use different colors as you're going ahead and doing this. For example, this will be for a little kid. I could use blue for my husband. Okay, so this is the chart that we're going to work from, and we'll talk about this when we get to the cabling. But first of all, I want you to go ahead and cast on 76 stitches. And again, I am using my very stretchy cast on for this. Let me get my needles together. I really like these cubic interchangeables. They work quite nicely for arthritic hands because they don't roll around. Now, if this bothers you, you can lay it in hot water, warm water, and it will stretch out. I don't worry too much about that. That doesn't bother me. But I've been knitting quite a while, so some things that don't bother me might get in your way, and so fix it. Go ahead and warm those up, stretch them out a little bit so that they are more flat for you. Okay, so let me put this away before I lose it. This key is really important. Okay. So I've gone ahead and pulled some of my yarn, and I keep my yarn at my right-hand side because I'm right-handed. If you're left-handed, you'll keep it at your left-hand side. And I'm going to try and find, sometimes I will go ahead, if I have too much yarn that I've pulled out looking for the inside edge, I will go ahead and wrap it just to keep it out of my way. And sometimes I will use a finger to kind of, you can see I'm lifting my finger up so that it doesn't get too tight around my yarn ball. The reddish brown toque that I knit, it was actually made with wool, and so it is very warm. It is very nice, and it's a nice pattern because it came from a Knit Picks. It's a Knit Picks yarn, but it has little slubs in it, little yellow and brown, black, white. It's just kind of a neat little look. Okay, so we're going to cast on. I'm casting on 76 for a child's hat. If you're doing something other than a child's hat, then you'll want to make sure you have your sizes right. So I'm going to hold my yarn's end, and I'm going to wrap it once, and then the second time I kind of push it to the back. And I do that because I want to get the first one that I wrapped and pull the second one through to make my knot. Now, if you know how to make a slip knot, then just go ahead. It's basically a slip knot. Okay, so I don't keep a lot of tail because I don't want to start knitting with my tail. And the other thing that I will do when I start is I will actually hold it with my needle so that it's down there. Now, if you remember correctly, we cast on, this is a very stretchy cast on. It's almost like knitting, except that we put that on the other side and tighten it up just a little bit. You put your needle through, you come around from the back, you grab that, and when you make them equal like this, when you've come out like this, then you take your left hand needle up through and slip it on there. So let's go ahead and do 76 of those, and I will be right back as soon as I have that done. Okay, so I have my 76 stitches on, and I'm going to show you if I'm casting on a lot of stitches and I don't want to remember, and 76 isn't a terrible lot, but some things we've made 300, 400, 500 stitches. I go ahead and I use these very small stitch markers. I think I've shown them to you in a different video. They snap open like this, so they are movable, especially if you're doing cables and you have to move things. But generally I do, when I do 25, I'll knit on 25, and then I'll put a marker, knit 25, put a marker, knit 20, and this is 26 because it's an odd number. So that's the way I keep my numbers straight. Now, you can, because these open, you can either take them off now or you can just take them off as you knit. I would suggest you get some of these. They are from Amazon, and they're very, just look for stitch markers, and they'll show up somewhere in the search. But I'm going to use, when we get into our cables, I'm going to use the red and green, green for go and red for stop when I start doing the pattern. And I will put one at the beginning and at the end. The beginning and the end. So that will tell me whether I'm doing my stitches right, and we'll talk about that more as we get closer to doing our cable stitches. So if you can get these, fine. If not, any stitch marker you have will be very helpful for this. Now, this is going to be a knit one, purl one, so it's not terribly critical how we divide these, but somewhere in the middle, you're going to want to put half of your stitches on one needle and half of your stitches on another. And I'm going to just randomly pick one. And so I kind of separate my stitches and pull my cable, and one of them, there we go, that's the longer one, until I have stitches on both needles. And I do want to put them on both needles because it helps me to see. You don't want to twist your stitches, so you do want to get these kind of so that you can kind of see your edges. Now, there are my bumps, and my bumps are all in the middle. Let me see if I can pull that out of the way for a moment while I show you that. So when they're on one needle, they're like this, but when I pull them, I try to make sure that my bumps stay in the middle, because then that tells me I haven't twisted my stitches. So the next thing I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and pull everything up to the edge of my needles, and especially my left hand needle. That's the one I'm going to knit from. In another video, I'm going to show you how you can make sure that you're not having a bump. A lot of times when you cast on, you'll have that little bump, which you can sew this in to kind of make it hide. But in another video, I'll show you how we hide that so that it's not so critical. So I have all of my bumps in the middle of my needles. I'm going to pull my right hand needle and leave yourself a little bit of a tail. And then we are going to do, now, the yarn on your right hand needle, you want to kind of try and use your fingers to keep that as close to your first stitch as you can, so you don't have a big gap between them. So I'm going to do that. I'm using my middle finger to kind of hold those down. So I'm going to go ahead and do my first knit, and you are still going to have a little bit of a gap. And then I'm going to do a purl. And we're going to go back and forth, knit, purl, the entire way around. Now this is a little bit more work than our other one of 3-3. It takes a little bit longer, especially to get the first row started. But just bear with me. I'm trying to stay in screen. Sometimes that's hard when you're watching your knitting and then trying to watch the screen to make sure that you can see what I'm doing. Now I could have used my metal needles on this, and you might see me switch later. When I first started knitting, I hated the metal needles. That's all we had, the straight metal needles, and things invariably just fell off. And so when they came out with the Takumi Clover and the wooden ones, these are really nice for new knitters because they kind of keep your stitches, they grab the yarn a little bit better. Okay, so there's one of my stitch markers. I'm just going to flick it off, and I'm going to go ahead and purl that next stitch. Now, I do want to tell you that I want to end on a purl stitch, and I think I've told you this in my other video. The reason I do that is if I set down my knitting in the middle, I'm not at the beginning, and you can tell you're at the beginning of your round because of the tail for now. But if I would set this down at the end of this row, and especially your first row, it's easier if you have finished with a purl stitch, so that you know to start with a knit stitch on every side. Now, this is perfect. I'm ending on a purl stitch, but I have one more knit stitch. And since I want my first stitch on this needle to be a knit, I'm going to show you how you can fix that. Just go ahead and pull, kind of hold your, until it's on that side. Okay? And then I know that I can start with a knit stitch. It's just my way of keeping things organized, and I don't have to think a whole lot. I don't have to try and figure out, especially your first row. Your first row is very hard to be able to see whether you're on a knit or purl stitch. It's not impossible, but it's a little bit harder. Okay, and then I'm going to pull this one again. And I don't know how I did that, but that's okay. So then I know that my first stitch on this side is going to be a knit stitch. And again, kind of hold these together. Don't pull them terribly tight, or you'll have a hard time getting it up over your needle when you come around the next time. But just enough so that you don't have a big gap. I don't have a professional setup with my camera because I'm not a professional. I'm not earning money with any of this. I know that a lot of girls that do YouTube videos and other things, they have very professional setups. I don't feel the need because I'm not in this to make money. I'm in this just to share the love of crafting. So sometimes it's a little bit hard for me to keep in screen. I do apologize for that. Okay, I have a purl. And I'm going to flick that off with my thumb. And then I'm going to finish these stitches. Oops, I split it. Let me see, where am I? Knit, purl, knit. I want to tell you girls, if you use a lot of Knit Picks yarn, there are more expensive yarns out there, and I have used them. But for a lot of things that I do, Knit Picks is just wonderful yarn. It's very reasonably priced. They have a lot of choices. You do have to spend, from Knit Picks, you do have to spend $65 to get the free shipping, which sometimes that's a lot. You don't want to have to spend that much. Sometimes you spend twice that much, but sometimes you don't want to spend quite that much. So Knit Picks is a subsidiary company, and the other company that they have is called We Crochet. And We Crochet is the sister company, and it's not knitting, it's crocheting. But the nice thing about We Crochet, a couple nice things about We Crochet is, first of all, they have all the yarns that Knit Picks has. They have it on their site. The next thing that I really like about We Crochet is their shipping. You only have to purchase $35 to get their free shipping. So that is actually a big plus. So if you're looking to get a smaller batch of yarn and you don't want to pay a lot of shipping, you want to get free shipping, go to wecrochet.com, and they're the same company, it's just a different name. So okay, I am at the end of my first row, both sides. So I've pushed my needles up, and I'm going to go ahead and pull this one out. And again, I'm on a knit stitch, so I'm going to keep that with my middle finger, I kind of hold that down so that it doesn't flop. And after we get going a little bit, you won't have to do this. Now remember, when you go to purl, you have to purl through the back. So let me see if I can show you again. I'm knitting through the front, and then I find my stitch and I have to purl, which means I go under it and I purl. This is a especially nice way to know how to purl when you're doing cable knitting, because sometimes with cable knitting, when you transition from a knit to a purl stitch, the purl stitch gives the old way that we used to purl. It gives too much yarn in your transition, and you will get ladders, or you'll get spaces that look really kind of nasty. So the way I purl, and I do this all the time just because I'm used to it, I started out doing the old purl where we would throw it clockwise, and this one is counterclockwise. Yeah, I got a purl. And so I do this all the time. It doesn't matter if I'm doing cables or not. Anytime I have to purl, I purl this way. But you do have to remember to work through the back of the stitch. Otherwise, you're twisting your stitches and you'll have a mess. So what we're going to do this pattern, this knit one, purl one, for 1.5 inches. And I'm going to go ahead and let you do that this week. And next Friday, when we do our Friday fiber class, we're going to start talking about working cables. And I'm going to show you how to start your first line of cables with your stitch markers to help you to know where your cables should be. It also helps you to not worry that you've skipped something or that you've missed something, because you'll know exactly where all of your cables start and stop. Oh, this is so nice. I've ended on a purl stitch. So I know that the next time, I hate to do that. I like to push. So the next time I start knitting, I'm going to start with a knit stitch. So let's go ahead and work on this week. Do your knit and purl, knit, purl, knit, purl for 1.5 inches, and that's where your little ruler will come in nice and handy. Also, if you can get some of these, go to a yarn shop, or Amazon has them. Get some of these. These are some of the nicest stitch markers that I've found, because several reasons. First of all, they're very thin, and so when you're knitting, they don't take up a lot of space and make you have what we call a ladder. They don't have a hard time. They close up really nicely, and they take up little space. Second of all, they open so that you can take them out and move them if you have to, and on some cables, that's necessary. And the other thing I like about them is they come in a variety of colors. So for example, what we're going to do with our toque, we're going to have a start and a stop where our cables are. So you can use different colors, and you don't have to use the green and the red like I'm going to do. You can use any color you like to tell you this is where I start and this is where I stop. So that's the other reason I really like these, and there's a bunch of them. There's lots of them in here. Okay, so I hope this has been helpful for you. Make sure you also have your cable needle, or you have double points in a size 8. That will help you. This is actually a better choice than a long double point, because it doesn't get in the way as much, and you can finagle it with your fingers, which I will show you some of that when we get into it. Okay, I will see you next time. Thank you for stopping. I've really enjoyed this. I will see you next week when we start some cable work. Bye-bye.